Hey everyone, Tin Man here, and as I'm sure you know, Season 1 of Dota Underlords has just been released, and it brings with it a lot of new units, alliances, and strategies. While it's still definitely too early for a full tier list, I wanted to let you know about a few of the new builds that are available in Season 1 that I think have a lot of potential. These builds take advantage of some of the new alliances and units, so make sure you try them out as soon as possible. First up is a Summoners and Savage kind of strategy. Obviously, with Summoners, you want to be summoning lots of units, but the Summoner Alliance basically affects everything that didn't start the round on your board. This includes things like the Spiderlings from the Insect Alliance, the Eidolons from the Primordial Alliance, Anessix Summoned Companion and her Golem from her Ultimate, as well as the units that Anessix enthralls since she resummons them as demons. This means that Anessix is often going to be the Underlord of choice for this style of build, since either version of her is very strong. However, you're also often going to be stacking Savages, so Let's Go Crazy from Hobgen gives a strong attack speed buff that is very valuable with Savages. If you have more of those, and you have the option to pick support Hobgen, you can consider him as well. In general, this is a strategy that thrives when it's already ahead. So if you find your upgrades earlier than your opponents and you level up faster and are generally winning, then this build can carry you even further to a top finish. But if you're on a losing streak and you're struggling to really upgrade your units, then this build can honestly fall apart since it relies on longer fights to make lots of summons, stack the Savage attack damage, but if you get overrun, then you can't really compete. Here's an example of a strong 8-unit build that has 4 Summoners, 4 Savages, and 4 Druids. This build is pretty efficient, only wasting 2 Alliance tags, the Human and Warlock, while also completing Primordials and Insects on the side. It also has a very smooth build pass with Magnus, Arc Warden, and Nature's Prophet as the 1 and 2 cost units making up your early game, and then lots of options between Lycan and Lone Druid and Io into the mid game, and then finally adding Insects later on when you find a Sand King. Until you find him, though, you can use another Savage to complete the 4 Savage Alliance. There are a few alternate units. Swapping in Venomancer and Tidehunter gives you Scaled for additional magic resist. This build is generally pretty weak to mages and AoE since it has so many summon units to give the mages AoE effects so much value, so a Scaled Alliance is definitely worthwhile in those matchups. If you find yourself lacking some frontline, you may want to throw in some brutes like Treant Protector and then later Axe, who is especially valuable if you find Bristleback as a Savage early on to rack up lots of Brawny kills. And if you're looking to really dominate the game, you can go for 6 Savages using Tusk and Bristleback to give you the 6 Savages and get attack damage to all of your summons, but this is more of a glass cannon style build going for 6 Savages. It hits really hard, but you have very little survivability or CC. You don't really have room for a strong frontline or for other types of effects, so I only recommend going for 6 Savages if you're already winning, or if you pick up Let's Go Crazy Hobgen for that attack speed boost. Here's an example of the positioning. It's pretty straightforward. You've got your melee units and Lone Druid up near the front, and then your more fragile ranged summoners like Nature's Prophet and Arc Warden in the back. You generally want to position Io so these tethered to your strongest unit, which is generally going to be either Magnus or Lycan because they hit the hardest up in melee range. Next up is a kind of a weird build, Void Hunters. Void, as an alliance, fits much more naturally into Assassins, since you have Templar Assassin and Faceless Void who are already your Assassins, and you don't have any Hunters that are Void. But the pure damage comes from each attack with Voids, which means that Hunters, with their bonus attacks, can really make good use of the Void Alliance. To make this work well, though, you really need to get the new Crown of Antlers item, which makes one of your units a Hunter. This allows you to fit the 3 Voids along with 6 Hunters in just 8 units, rather than typically needing 9. It's critical to get this power spike earlier in the game, and to have a little bit more flexibility to add in other units as well. This combo has amazing single target DPS, and it's also a lot of pure damage, so it can easily counter the high health Brawny units or other tanky units from the opponent. Your team will be great at focus firing thanks to Vigilant that comes with Hunters, and it can quickly take out units one by one. This is also very flexible in terms of what Underlords it prefers. Damage support Anessix can amp up the physical damage, Jull can provide more frontline, and Let's Go Crazy from Hobgen is great with the Void Alliance as well for that bonus attack speed. An example build here, this build uses 9 units with the Crown of Antlers on Templar Assassin. We've got 6 Hunters, 3 Void, 4 Vigilant, and even a Heartless buff with Pudge up on the front line. This combo is incredibly powerful if it can reach this point, but it's a little bit weak until then, before it completes all of its synergies in the late game, so be wary of being eliminated too quickly because you will be a little bit weak until you really hit that level 8 and 9 spot. Some alternatives for this build include insects like Weaver to complete the Hunter alliance early on, instead of maybe Beastmaster or Terrorblade. This opens up the possibility of Nyx Assassin as well, who's another early game insect, which will then give you insects early on, but also give you 3 assassins in the late game along with Templar Assassin and Faceless Void. Now normally I don't advocate mixing assassins and hunters, but in this build it actually kind of works just because of the natural overlap between their other alliances. As a hunter build, you're always going to want to pick up Medusa in the late game if you can find her, and then if you're facing down a lot of mages, throw in Tide Hunter for some frontline, maybe instead of Pudge, instead of Heartless, to give yourself a little bit of magic resistance from the scaled bonus. Typically, without Vigilant, you would want to be stacked up in a corner for positioning with this style of build to ensure that all of your units will focus fire. But if you do have 4 Vigilant, then you can really be a little bit more spread out because you know your units are going to be able to focus fire on whoever casts spells thanks to the Vigilant Alliance. That being said, you still want to be stacked your range hunters want to be stacked up near the Drow Ranger to take advantage of her precision aura effect like we see here in the bottom right corner of the board. The final new composition I want to talk about is Brawny, which is not really a new build, I know, but it did get a huge boost from Season 1 thanks to Snapfire becoming Brawny and Bristleback moving down to Tier 2, so he's much more accessible in the early game. That means it's much easier to get the Brawny units leveled up and getting kills right off the bat. And this means they rack up more health and faster, which then snowballs throughout the game, so it's a lot more powerful now. This build is very flexible, as outside of the 4 Brawnies, you really have a lot of options to fill out the build, like Dragons, Hunters, and Warlocks. Though oftentimes, going up to 5 or even 6 Brawnies is often correct. Just throw in another copy of Bristleback, or throw in the 5th or 6th Brawny, just because they all still benefit from that health bonus, so they're probably just like the strongest units to put in anyway, once you've racked up a whole lot of kills. Here's an example build using the 3 early game Brawnies, Bristleback, Snapfire, and Beastmaster, and then adding in Disruptor at the 4 cost slot to round it out. Then you're pretty flexible, but I like Shadow Fiend and Viper. They're great mid-game options with high damage output, and they also give you Warlocks and Dragons, respectively. Lone Druid and Treant are very synergistic as well, giving Druid and Savages along with Bristleback, and then also setting you up for Brutes if you manage to find Axe as an ace unit in the late game. Like I said, there's plenty of options for other units throughout the game. Hunters pair well with Beastmaster and often lead you towards a more of a Heartless or Vigilant type of build with Mirana and Drow Ranger. If you want to pick up more warriors, like say you find some early Juggernauts, then picking up Juggernaut, Tidehunter, and Slarter can also give you Scaled to give you some magic resistance against mages who may be very popular in this new season. As for positioning, you can place most of the Brawny units up front, since they're going to have so much bonus health, but your damage-dealing Brawnies like Bristleback and Beastmaster can often be offset from the line, just a little bit back, so they don't take too much aggro initially, they don't get burst down before they get their spells off. Snapfire, on the other hand, even though she's a ranged Brawny unit, is very good up on the front line. This ensures that she gets mana quickly to cast her Mortimer Kisses ability, and also to hit the maximum number of enemies with her Scatterblast shot. That does it for these first builds. Once again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, or even a tier list. It's just a few of the new ideas that you should try out. Let me know how these builds work for you down in the comments below, and also let me know what kind of cool new builds are working well for you. Big thanks to all of my channel members. This channel is supported by its members and by viewers like you, so if you like this content and want to help me continue making it, please do consider clicking the join button down below, or even over at Patreon at patreon.com/tinman354. Extra special thanks to Lord tier channel member John Vise. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.